I was born in Blythe, California on August 23, 1921. Leota, the oldest, Leoma and Loyal were born either in Oklahoma or Texas. Mom and Dad moved to California where I was born. He got a job at Blythe helping to build one of the bridges over the Colorado River. Blythe is so hot, some of the family slept on the roof. We little kids were too young and might fall off. Loyal did fall off and broke his arm. I went barefoot, of course, and it was so hot I could not walk in the sand in the middle of the day, but had to jump from the shade to shade of a sagebrush to keep from burning my feet. While in Blythe, my father and mother were working their way towards the divorce. It was a very contentious marriage. To this day, I am not exactly sure of the underlying reasons, but strongly suspect infidelity played a major part. I used to lie awake and hear them arguing through the paper-thin walls. If there was any attempt to save the marriage, no doubt it had to do with staying together because of us children. I resolved I would never do this to my kids. It affected me that much. People, keep this in mind. If you think divorce is a solution and has no effect on your children, think again. Later, after the breakup and Dad had to leave me with a babysitter, I cried all day until he got back home, which was just a tin in an orchard during harvest. I remember this incident to this day. Kay told me, too, that Diane cried all day at the day nursery while I was away in the Army. During World War II, she worked at the Railway Express Agency to supplement her 80 government bucks a month while I was gone. It costs money to make war. They worry about PTSD in soldiers. They don't worry about PTSD on a child whose parents break up. What is the difference? I told Kay when I married her I would never leave her. Whether I could live up to the standards that she would want to stay with me was something else, of course. But she overlooked my shortcomings, which no doubt were many, and we have been together now for 72 years. This picture of Rusty will freak out the enemies of the Second Amendment. All the foregoing was going on in the 20s. I don't remember the sequence of houses we lived in, but we did live in Madera, where Flora was born, across the street from a grade school, and if I remember right, I went to kindergarten there. That cannot be right because when Flora was born, I was not old enough to go to school. On the other hand, we may have lived there twice, which is more likely. Madera was the only place where I could have gone to the store for Mother, as all the other places we lived were in the country. She said when I got to the street, I would wait there until there was not a car in sight and then run across. On the other hand, she said Loyal, my brother, and a friend would wait until a car was approaching them, then dart out in front of it to hear the tires screech. We lived in the country and in one of these houses at one time, and when we came home, it had burned to the ground. Rusty was born in Visalia, so we lived there. I used to have a picture of Grandma Ferguson picking cotton outside Visalia. So many of my pictures I can't find. She was quite old and before welfare, so if you didn't work, you didn't eat. I think we had moved back to Blythe when my parents broke up for good. What I did there in Blythe could only have happened when I was old enough to run wild. Sneaking into the movie theater, terrorizing little black kids, pick on the little ones, of course, who could not fight back. Besides, I always had my older brother along. So they sent us kids back to Oklahoma to live with Grandma and Grandpa Gudgel, all 6 of us. I must have been 7 or 8 because I would have been in the 2nd grade, but they kept me back into the 1st. After a few weeks, though, they put me into the 2nd. We lived at Boggy Depot, which had been an army depot during the Civil War or Indian Wars, I don't know which. The nearest post office was Coleman. Boggy Depot was just a road intersection at that time. There was a cemetery there which was moved when they created a lake and it was flooded. My great-grandfather, Thomas Jefferson Gudgel, was buried there. The graves were moved to another location and his has been lost. His father, Henry T. Gudgel, was also lost in the Civil War because he died when there was a huge number of casualties from typhoid fever. And in the chaos, or the way they handled huge numbers of casualties, where he is buried is unknown. The military tries to keep a record of where soldiers are buried, but they did not always succeed. General Grant had picked the flat spot next to the Ohio and Mississippi rivers and called Camp Holt. Soldiers must have drunk from the river water. He lasted about 6 weeks before he died. The picture of the truck was taken by running ahead of it with the camera. It didn't stop. Didn't need to stop to pick up the cameraman either, I'm sure. I remember I would string along when my uncles went hunting for a possum at night. Possums sleep while hanging by their tails from a tree branch. We hunted not for fun, but for food. We raised cattle and hogs for food, too. We couldn't live on possum only. A number of the daughters had married and moved to California. The picture of us in front of the truck was taken in Texas on the way. I don't know which relatives lived there. I don't remember much about the trip, but some things that were told to me or I read in some of Opal's writing. At the inspection station, I remember this. At the California line, the inspector made us take everything out of the truck and put it on the ground. They were just doing this to then be nasty to the Okies. Later, I talked to Opal about it, but he had forgotten all about it. For me to have remembered it meant that it must have been pretty prominent at the time. In Arizona, we had transmission troubles and a nut got dropped into the transmission. Rusty's hands were so small he could get in and pick it out. Whether they had the tools to take the transmission apart was doubtful. You can see by the picture that they had tires in case of flats. In those days, a flat tire was very common. But we did not have a flat tire on the entire trip. Anyone who has driven Highway 99 into Los Angeles knows of a long downhill section going down into the San Joaquin Valley to Bakersfield. When we got to it, they were so happy that they just put the transmission in neutral and let it coast. Wrong. The transmission could not take it and burned out. So they had to call one of the son-in-laws to come and get us. So that's how we wound up in Chowchilla, which is the name of an Indian tribe in the area. Kay's grandfather, Jim Henry, seems to have come from the same area of Oklahoma and Missouri that the Gudgels did. They both raised cotton and both came from the same part of Missouri too. That seems to be about the only similarity between them. The background of the Gudgels is, from the beginning, poor white, except for one woman, the wife of Henry T., who was Lucy Thurman. They all were on the lower rung of society. Lucy was the daughter of a senator from Ohio, I think. But that is the only upper class that I can find. Kay's ancestors prior to her grandfather in Missouri were a number of connections to the rich and famous. Maybe this explains why, when they left Oklahoma, the Henrys pursued education, whereas the Gudgels pursued farming. Rita, Kay's mom, was born in Red Lodge, Montana, while her dad was making his moves towards Seattle and the Northwest. In any case, Kay was born at the foot of Queen Anne Hill, across the street from Seattle Pacific University. Then it was Seattle Pacific College. Born in the street, she was born in a house at the foot of Queen Anne Hill, across the street. After attending a grade or part of a grade at SPC, Frank bought a house near 80th and Corliss, actually down just a little bit south of 80th. Her mom did not want her walking to school about a mile away, so she had to stay home while watching the other kids carrying the lunch boxes, walking their way to school. She wished she could be with them. To please Rita, Frank sold this house for an old car, I think it was a Hudson, then sold the car for $200, losing everything in the house he had invested. He made 2 moves for Rita, which cost him a bundle, but he was extremely loyal. They then moved to 616 West, then it was Northwest 81st, where she graduated from Greenwood Elementary. From there, she went to Ballard High, where she met me. She shared a locker with my sister Flora. We also had a class or two, I think, but now I don't remember which. During the Depression, Frank had a job, but with so many relatives without a job, he helped them out financially, which made him very poor. Kay had to make her own money because he wasn't going to give her any, and she did this by babysitting for 10 cents an hour. I have a picture of the gal she babysat for. Kay had a lot of interesting stories from Ballard, but I don't remember well enough to tell them for her. Remember that she was so skinny that she was so skinny the nurse would not allow her to do gym, but made her lie down at break and drink and eat cookies. She took Latin when we went to Italy. And when we went to Italy, she was able to practice it real time. She hung out with a number of kids there on the block and was close to them her entire life. Because of my contact with her, I was also in contact with them. Guyette Fraser, who got in early with Hewlett-Packard, made out well like early people at Microsoft did. My memory has always been bad, but when I concentrate, I can remember some things, usually outstanding one way or another, usually bad. Like the time when at Chowchilla, I think when I got something in my eye, I suffered for 2 days before they took me to the doctor who got it out. Mother and Dad could not find it. Later, when my mother tried again to get possession of us 3 younger kids, the family and relatives heard she was in the area and warned us not to have anything to do with her. Talk about brainwashing. She did see us at the Central School where we were playing, but we were too terrified to talk to her. It must have hurt her a lot. Dad was not a very good parent. Babysitters were just about unknown. When we went to work, we were pretty much on our own. As I said, I remembered the outstanding events, and one of them was while Dad was at work. I don't remember where Rusty was, but Flora and I used to play with some neighbor kids, where we got some education about the opposite sex. Nothing really all that bad, as the opposite sex was so new to us. Another thing about this time in our life was that we lived in a barn for sleeping, and a separate trailer for cooking and eating. Then on the outside was a bed. Why a bed on the outside, I don't have any idea. There must not have been much danger of rain, because there was a bed in the barn nearby. Actually, the San Joaquin Valley would be a desert without irrigation. We would eat and cook in the trailer. During the day, when Dad was away at work, we played on the bed. One day, a chicken hen laid an egg on it, and we kids got to watch it. If my memory is right, we got to lift her up and watch the egg come out. I guess you'd say we were poor. I don't remember just where it was because Dad and Mom were together, but when they were out in the evening, I would go to the corner and go to sleep. One time I was hungry, and there was some Excelsior, and I wanted Leo to give me some because I thought it was shredded wheat. She sadly informed me we could not eat it. We were in the class of people that throughout history nothing is really known about. Occasionally something was written about them when printing was invented. In ancient Rome and Greece, what we only know is on the walls of obelisks or walls commemorating some conquest by Caesar. I have not done a good job of listing where we lived during our first sojourn in California before Mom and Dad broke up. So I will go over what I can remember, not in any particular order, just as I remember it. Blythe, of course, where I was born. Then later, when I was old enough to raise some cane that I told you about. Go to where there was work, I suppose. As I think of it, maybe we were more like transits, not like someone who intended to settle down and stay. I think this because we lived in so many places. For instance, we lived in Blythe twice at least, Madera twice, once in town and the other out, but with the Madera address. Sugar Pine up near the big trees, over near the coast where Dad picked fruit and I cried all day until he got home. Down in the Imperial Valley where we did farm work, he did farm work. Some Mexican neighbors looked after me while he was away. There I picked up a little Mexican lingo I remember to this day. I can count to 10 and say vamos por la casa. It's not spelled right. I don't know how to spell it. I knew vamos meant for someone to go away. Just the other day, about 85 years later, I learned it meant to go home, which might have been what they were saying to me. I used to know more words, but I have forgotten. But let's get on with our life. Eventually, Mom and Dad made some sort of an agreement, and Mom got possession of us 3 little kids. She already had possession of the 2 older, Loyal and Leoma. Lilda was already married. Except for the incident at Central School, this part is a total blank about how we went with Mother. I next remember being in Salem, Oregon. We kids are still being taken of by a single parent and in the Depression, no less. So no doubt I would remember something caused by poverty. I don't remember just what it was, but probably because I had to eat oatmeal without sugar. I hated oatmeal without sugar and milk. If I eat it, which I do rarely because of my diabetes, I have to have milk and sugar in it. From Salem, we moved out to Sandy Am, where I remember exploring the winter in a forest without leaves on the trees. To this day, I get the same feeling when I go into the woods in winter and see all the places where the animals could be living. As there was nothing there for us, Mother pulled up stakes and we went to Seattle. South of Seattle, going down towards the Duwamish River on Highway 99 was a motel, which was the first place we stayed. Mom was headed for a place near 12th and Jackson because she had heard there was a mission at 12th and Jackson where Pastor's brother Jack would help us. Probably the next day we went to the area and rented an apartment at 1415 Jackson. Last time I looked, it was still there. We attended the mission for a while, but as Mother got no help at all from Pastor Jack, Brother Jack he was known as, we moved to another church. But before we moved, we stayed in the area for some time. We moved to 21st and Yesler, then a couple blocks to the upper floor of a house made into an apartment on the same street. A few years ago, the house was still there. Recently, a cop was killed there execution style. It was less dangerous then. Mother was a very conservative Christian and tried to bring us kids up the same way. One of her rules was that we do not watch movies. One day at Washington Grade School, now Seattle Central College, the teacher was making ready to show an instructional film. I was so upset I got up and walked out and stayed in the hall. Shortly, the teacher came out and kindly asked what was wrong. I don't think she tried to get me to go back. I don't think there were any free lunches at school in those days. As we had no money, I had to bring what I could from home. For a while, the school made some work for me, which was to clean the boys' and girls' restroom. I don't know how much of a clean they got out of me at 12. I got to eat in the lunchroom for a while because of this. For a young kid with my upbringing, going to the girls' restroom was really something. All this time, I entertained myself by walking to the downtown library and reading every book on Indians and World War I could find. I had an old beat-up guitar, and Loyal bought me a very nice Epiphone for $175. That was a huge amount of money in those days. I practiced for hours every day. He worked as a messenger for Western Union. I didn't know until after he died that he had bought it. I thought Mother bought it. I never got to thank him. On the corner of 12th and Jackson, there was a black who sold newspapers from a paper shack the city allowed him to build on the corner. To make some money, I would subcontract by getting some of his papers and try to sell them on the other corner closer to town. Of course, I would have to make a sale while the light was red. Otherwise, they would go across the street to Neverseat to buy their paper. I was not successful at this because I was not aggressive enough, I think, but mainly there was just not enough time to make a sale. Important, too, was that as the paper sold for a nickel, my cut was not very much, as he had to have a little bit, too. I tried a few times to go to town and buy some papers from the Seattle Star, which sold for 3 cents. At that time, there were 3 newspapers published in Seattle. However, with a 3-cent price, there wasn't much to be made off a sale. No wonder the Star went out of business. On top of this, I had to take the papers out of the area to where I could sell them, which meant I'd have to go through another boy's territory, and they'd take a damn view of someone else in their territory with newspapers. We next moved to 3410 Albion Place in Fremont. It was here I went to Lincoln High School. I also had gotten a job delivering telegrams for Western Union by then. When they thought of delivering singing telegrams, I was the first to deliver a singing telegram in Seattle. I remember it well because I made a 50-cent tip. It was a happy birthday song. What else? After this, we moved to 5810 17th Northwest, where I remember a couple things during my Western career. I would ride my bike to work from home, which was several miles. One time, delivering a telegram, I was turning the corner to go down the hill next to the federal courthouse on 5th and Madison when my chain came off. Ahead of me was Puget Sound at the bottom of a steep hill and no brakes and nothing to stop me but running into a car or the Sound 5 blocks down. It did not take me long to decide getting off the bike was what I should do. So I jumped off, but it had already picked up speed and I could not run fast enough to keep from falling. That picture of me with my arm in a sling was because of the fall. I broke my collarbone. Then one day I was delivering a telegram on Capitol Hill and a guy opened the driver's side door and knocked me over into the street, which broke my little finger. The doctor said it, but not quite straight enough for playing the guitar easily. So for the rest of my life, playing the guitar, I had a I had a hard time making some cords. These days it'd be worth quite a bit of damages, but those days we never thought of suing. I guess Western Union had some sort of insurance because I got them to have the doctor set it. The shoulder too, I'm sure. I had no money. $7 a week doesn't go very far, even in those days. One time I got a call to go to an apartment about 7th and University Street. When I went in, there were two guys who wanted me to do a sex act. I was really scared. When you hear about all these sex crimes, I just might have been very lucky. So what? I got out of there as quickly as I could. I told the agent, but he could not care less. Actually, delivering telegrams is quite dangerous, especially downtown. I worked First South Office, University, and at West Seattle. These bike delivery services downtown now, I'm sure, are in just as much danger. I suppose they still deliver packages, but the internet might have put them out of business. I haven't been downtown for a while. But it was while I was at Ballard that I met Kay due to her having the same locker as Flora, my sister. Mother was having a rough time trying to manage us three younger kids. She had to put Rusty and Flora in youth homes because she could not handle them. Flora in the Rioter home, still in business. I tried to get her records recently, but has been too long. They no longer had them. I helped Mom out with part of my meager wages and doing chores like getting firewood for the cook stove. We bought the cheap stuff from the Ballard sawmill, which is just 90% bark, so it did not burn long or produce much heat. But what I was giving her was not enough, and she got mad at me for not giving her more and made me leave home. Somehow I did not hate her for this. Nor did I hate Virgil for trying to make me do some homosexual acts. I continued on with normal relations with both of them. When I would meet them later, I was just a 17-year-old kid. I didn't steal or do anything bad. Every day I'd walk past this little market on 60th and 15th Northwest without ever stealing an apple or something, even though I might have been hungry. I brought my own lunch, peanut and jelly sandwich, I suppose. No lunches in those days. I didn't have enough money to get my picture in the Ballard Annual, but I had enough money for cigarettes. My interest at that time was what all 17-year-olds are interested in. I never had a real home or friends of long standing until I met Kay. Mom had us three kids in the middle of the Depression and just could not handle the situation. To make ends meet, she rented out a couple rooms. I always feel bad for Rusty, and he was not able to understand all this, what was happening, I'm sure. He was not able to have friends either. So when he joined the Navy with Mother's permission at 17, he was assigned to a 5-inch gun battery. He finally had some friends. Anyone in the military understands this. There were 25 in the battery. Finally, he had some real buddies. Early in the war, his ship, the carrier Lexington, was sunk at the Battle of the Coral Sea, and 23 of his 25 friends were killed instantly. I am sure it had a devastating effect on him. It probably explains how he was after the war. PTSD, who needs it? They didn't know about it in those days. After a year, the Navy sent him back to Seattle, where he served on a Navy tugboat to Alaska, as I understand it, but others say he was on a Corvette. I think the sinking of the Lex did great harm to him. I didn't do a lot of talking to him when he was stationed in Seattle, but after the war I found I could not believe what he told me. He told me he was a pointer on a 20mm or so, some sort of gun on the Lex. In an amazing circumstance, I met the other survivor of the gun crew on the Lexington about 10 years ago. who was a lieutenant in command of the gun crew. He told me what kind of a gun it was. I forgot to ask what Rusty's job was. He told me what kind of a gun it was, with which I said was a 5-inch. Therefore, why 25 on the crew? Back to How I Met Your Mom. I was making about $7 a week and could not give Mom more. I needed cigarettes and car fare. About 17 cents a pack, $10 now. I'm glad I quit. So that is How I Met Your Mom, and start of how I met the girl and stayed married to for 72 years so far. So actually, Mother did me a favor. I hope you feel the same. Shows you how decisions affect you down. Shows you how decisions affect you down the road that you do not expect.